The Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage, it's one of the most important mechanisms of the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement because it looks at the urgency of addressing the climate impacts that developing countries and the most vulnerable are currently facing. It's a mechanism that allows developed countries to show solidarity with their developing country counterparts, and a mechanism that currently is not being utilised to the utmost that it could be. It's been very good at highlighting the urgency that needs to happen in terms of scaling up ambition, boosting climate finance, and it's also been very good at bringing together different stakeholders, different party groups, different civil society members to share best practices and information on solutions, but also information on what the actual issues are at a national level. However, where it's not been so good at the moment is in terms of looking at what the needs of developing countries are. The long-term vision of the Warsaw International Mechanism, it looks very much at the past, but it doesn't take into account the evolving needs of developing countries. As climate impacts become worse and worse, we're seeing that there are now new manifestations that hadn't previously been looked at in terms of how to address them. And one of the other big gaps in implementation of the WIM itself is on function 3 on action and support, including finance. So there is a provision for finance to address loss and damage to be addressed under the WIM, but to date there hasn't been any sort of structured discussion or structured mechanism put in place, for instance, a finance facility. And what developing countries are really looking for is for finance to address loss and damage. Currently, women and gender are being significantly underrepresented in terms of policy and decision-making processes. Women, children, members of the transgender community, they tend to play differing roles within society, within the household, within informal and formal economies, and they tend to experience climate change impacts in differing ways to that of men, and yet they're not significantly at all represented within the most relevant policy and decision-making processes, which are problematic because the members of these communities have different capacities and capabilities and solutions and best practices to share that are being missed on, and missing that opportunity isn't reflective of a structured, sustainable growth pathway. And so in terms of creating climate-compatible, sustainable development, it's imperative that members of these communities are drawn into these processes, not only because of the differing knowledge that they have to offer, but also because of the fact that they make up 50% minimum in economies and countries, and they deserve that right to be able to input into that structure going forwards.